Hey, it's Nick Frederking, AgriGold agronomist in Southern Illinois. Normally, I'm coming to you from the field, but to save some time and still deliver high quality information, we're going to try to tackle this from the office today. Specifically, we're talking about disease management, how to manage the diseases in our cornfields in 2024 with fungicides. I think there's an opportunity for a 10 or maybe even 20 bushel advantage out in some of our fields across southern Illinois. First thing you need to know though, in southern Illinois, traditionally we put on one fungicide application around tassel. There's been a good ROI on this, a lot of studies to prove that. We control some disease on the front end of the growing season. We try to protect ourselves from the back end with that one fungicide application. Today, I'm going to advocate for 2 passes of fungicide in the growing season. Now, you might be asking yourself, why would I want to put on 2 passes of fungicide? Well, we need the disease control specifically, but we can also reduce some stress in that corn plant's growing cycle throughout the season. In order to make 2 passes of fungicide and make it make sense, we first need to identify those critical diseases, those pathogens that are locally here in southern Illinois. Once we know which diseases we're trying to fight against, then we need to understand their disease cycles. How do they infect the crop and how can we stop them from doing so? Because we want to start clean with our plants. We want green tissue from the beginning all the way through the end. The more green tissue we have in those leaves, the more photosynthetic area we have, which is the ability to produce sugars inside of the plant. And the more sugar production we have inside of the plant, generally that leads to more yield and more production in the field. On top of disease control, we do know that fungicides have a plant health benefit as well. We can mitigate some of the stress, specifically drought stress in southern Illinois, but we can help these plants get through that with little stress, maintain their high yield potential through the beginning of the season with 2 pass fungicides. So, what are the important fungicides in southern Illinois? You might be thinking in your head, well, southern rust might be one. That's one of them. Let's start on the far left, though. The far left top corner, that's gray leaf spot. Those blocky lesions that have a hard time growing through the corn leaf veins. That's gray leaf spot. And gray leaf spot infects very early in the season, before tassel. This disease comes right off of the soil surface and gets on that plant and starts that infection early. That middle picture, we probably all know it. We probably all hate it. Southern rust. Boy, this has wreaked some havoc on southern Illinois cornfields for quite a while now, but it's different than gray leaf spot because southern rust, the spores that make the disease are not quite hardy enough to live here in southern Illinois throughout the winter. So they overwinter further south in the US where they can handle the moderate climate through those winter months. And then as we start growing here in southern Illinois, weather patterns, hurricane season are responsible for bringing southern rust spores and the disease up into our part of the world. And then this disease on the far right, if you haven't seen it yet, I'm sure you've heard about it. This is tar spot. And tar spot is here in southern Illinois. It's sporadic, but it is present. Now, this shares some commonalities between gray leaf spot and southern rust. Like southern rust, it had to blow in here to southern Illinois. Tar spot is predominant in the northern U.S., Iowa, northern Illinois, Michigan. Those places have tar spot year in and year out. But our weather patterns the last couple of years have pushed tar spot into our area and then gave it the properties that gray leaf spot has. Once tar spot is here, it's here to stay. We are finding that fields infected with tar spot are showing regular signs of it year over year. So once tar spot is here, it's here to stay, and this is a very significant disease. Typically we see tar spot start to take off in our corn plants after tassel. So with all this laid out in front of you, you can see that VTR1 right here in the middle, traditionally when we make our fungicide applications in Southern Illinois, this is slowing the progression of gray leaf spot on the front end, and this is offering us some protection in early grain fill against southern rust and tar spot on the back end. But today, I want to make a suggestion to you that adding 2 different passes of fungicide to target the front end diseases and then a second fungicide to target the back end diseases, we can actually pick up some significant yield out in the field. So bear with me here. I've never done this. I'm going to draw on the slide right in front of you. I want you to imagine that this is the field level. This is right at the soil line, or even here, this is the ground. Now, as that corn plant gets put into the ground, we have little tiny spikes that come out and the whorl is open. This is a corn plant. Just imagine with me. Corn plant whorl popping out of the ground. It's great. What I've just told you, though, and hopefully you understand, is that gray leaf spot spores are already here. So gray leaf spot spores, if we can replicate those with these little red dots all over the soil surface, they're sitting on old corn leaves, old corn stalks, old corn residue all over the field, whether you can see them or not. Now, I believe that as this corn plant starts to spike, these little spores through wind, rain, and splashing make their way into the whorl. Now, once those small microscopic spores are inside of that corn plant's whorl, arguably they're touching the first 5, 6, maybe even 7 plants or 7 leaves on that corn plant. So the corn plant starts to grow, put out its leaves, right? Start to get this action, leaves get bigger, plant gets taller. Now, it's my theory today that as that plant grows and it was exposed to the gray leaf spot spores, these spores are now sitting on the surface of these leaves. Somewhere in that fashion, they are close and on the tissue. But we need a few different things to happen for those spores to start germinating and producing those lesions, that dead brown tissue. We've got to have moisture sitting on those leaves for really 6 to 8 hours. We have to have high temperatures. We also have to have high humidity for these spores to get everything they need to start their germination process and produce disease lesions. Now, at V5 or V6 or V7, these plants are pretty small yet, really barely up your shin, to be honest with you. These are small plants, and so there's a lot of airflow up and down the rows. That doesn't allow us to hang on to a lot of moisture on those leaves. It doesn't build temperature naturally, and the humidity kind of follows that. What we do know is that as we get to V10, V12, and we start to build that canopy plant to plant, this is where we get those higher temperatures from the canopy. The humidity starts to build. And because we've got a canopy, the airflow down the row starts to slow down. And we can retain moisture on some of these bottom leaves, allowing those spores to start developing disease. I hope that makes sense. So when we target this fungicide pass early on, I really want to focus on the time frame from V5 to V10. If we do that, we make a fungicide application here, we can inhibit and kill these spores before they ever have a chance to start germination. This will keep our plants green from the beginning all the way through tassel. Now, I'm going to take on the next slide here, because I'm sure somebody's asking, well, 2-pass fungicides, that sounds great, makes sense, but how do I make that happen? So with the first thing I want to talk about is foliar application. Any ground rig can get over V10 corn. I prefer a V5 to V10 timing for this first pass fungicide. If logistically it makes sense to throw a fungicide in with your post-application herbicide, you can do that. That's fine. Make it make sense for you. My favorite timing is V7 to V10 out in the cornfield. And again, any ground rig can get over V7, V10 corn. Now, someone else might be asking, well, what product do I use? Is this going to return my investment? Fungicides are expensive today. I'll tell you what I've found. you can use high value fungicides, and those work great. You can also use cheaper fungicides. Those work as well in addition. The most important part about selecting your fungicide for this first pass, it has to have control of gray leaf spot and northern corn leaf blight early on. Those are the two diseases that we are targeting at the beginning here. Now, fungicide group selection. There's really 3 fungicide groups today. Again, which fungicide you use, I'm not partial, but we do need to target gray leaf spot and northern corn leaf blight. And I'll just reemphasize again, what equipment can I use to make this first pass of a 2-pass fungicide system? Almost every ground rig can get over this. So whether you have a sprayer or your co-op is spraying, this is a fairly easy pass to make. A couple years ago, I put out a 2-pass fungicide application trial, and the results were eye-opening. You get yield here on the left side. Underneath your very first bar, it says untreated. No fungicide applied there at all. We had 1 pass out in the field where we only applied at R3. This is the corn plant going from that blister to milk stage. After brown silk, we made a fungicide pass here. And then we made 1 pass where we applied at V7 and then again at R3. This was our 2-pass fungicide. Now, the last couple of years, we've really had low pressure of southern rust in southern Illinois. The weather patterns haven't been conducive to bring that in. But what do we have every single year? We have gray leaf spot because it comes right off of that soil surface. This explains these results from this year that I made this 2-pass application trial. Untreated, obviously that's our baseline. This is with disease present in the canopy. This is where our yields fell, somewhere around that 244 bushel range. When you made 1 application at R3, okay, there was a subtle gain, a very small gain in yield. Not sure it would have paid for itself, but the point here is we didn't see an exponential amount of gain because the late season diseases were not prevalent in this year. However, whenever you threw that fungicide pass in at that V7 timeframe, V7 to V10, we saw significant gain. The one major disease pulling us back in this year was gray leaf spot because it's there year in and year out. So it's also a year that we had some stress in terms of moisture. I think that early fungicide helped carry us through that as well. Nearly a 16 bushel advantage by just adding that early fungicide pass in at V7. Now, maybe you don't have foliar applications that you want to make and you have liquid on the planter. There's other options there too that still count as a 2-pass fungicide program. Xyway is a new product on the market. Active ingredient is flutriafol. This is a very mobile fungicide that can make its way through the plant and protect you from disease. When we ran trials with Xyway in our 2x2 on the planter, saw much cleaner leaves and another significant yield advantage. You can see clear as day that an untreated check with no protection against gray leaf spot offered up some lack of photosynthetic green tissue that we're talking about. The treated area had bigger leaves, much healthier plant, and again, this resulted in some very good yield gains. Got a fellow agronomist down in Georgia who use Xyway as well. Hopefully you guys can see this. There's a lot of information here. But what I want you to take away from is the yields measured down here at the bottom. You're picking up on average a 10 to 20 bushel advantage with Xyway. Now, with Xyway, it's a liquid product. It needs to go on the planter. That's the only way I would recommend using it. And it also needs to be placed in a 2x2 band or something off of the row, off of the seed. We don't want Xyway to touch the seed. We got some negative effects there. But if you've got furrow jet where you can get the Xyway off of the seed, that works. 2x2, 2x0, totally tubular, however it works for you. If you can logistically throw Xyway on the planter, you can find some pretty tremendous yield results just by controlling that critical gray leaf spot or northern corn leaf blight early on in the growing season. And then finally, This is another picture of a foliar application, generic Quilt Excel versus an untreated check. Pretty clear that the leaves are much cleaner in the protected zone versus the non-protected zone. So just the key message to wrap all this up is if you can start applying 2 fungicides in season, one at the beginning and one at the end, there are significant yield advantages present here in Southern Illinois, the trials that we've run. And you are specifically targeting this gray leaf spot and northern corn leaf blight on the front end. On that back end, I would push the timing back to about R3 and get yourself protection from the new tar spot and the classic southern rust. If we can protect from all of these diseases, we are going to drop the stress level of our corn plants, find additional yield, and in addition, you may get added benefits like crown rot protection. You know, at the end of the season, when your plants start to break down, stalks start to get a little wobbly and lazy, a lot of times that's the plant being stressed out and cannibalizing itself from the inside out. If you can keep the early diseases off of it, I think we keep ourselves healthy all the way through the growing season. So hopefully this adds something to think about as you go into planting season in 2024. Let's find some more bushels out there. If you have any more questions about a 2-pass fungicide system, reach out to your local DSM or myself. I'll be happy to help. Thank you.